Carolyn Llorens, a local architect and a client of mine, lives in a Clem Ford house and has become quite a Clem Ford fan. Carolyn has grown to appreciate Ford's work not only from living in one of his designs, but also from having worked on several of his homes. As an owner, architect, and fan, I asked Carolyn to put down her thoughts about Ford, and she kindly did. She titled her letter, "Finding Home," a fitting title for Ford's work. Here I quote Carolyn. "I first encountered a Clem Ford house when we were house hunting." Show you a few more of their house here. Sorry, that's too quick. I first encountered a Clem Ford house when we were house hunting, and one of his designs was for sale across the street from my best friend. It was owned by a lovely woman in her 90s, Mrs. Holloway, and the house was so lovingly cared for that one knew instantly that this house was no ordinary story and a half. It was my introduction to Mr. Ford's work, and I found it a jewel of a house with perfectly proportioned rooms. Even though by today's standards it would be considered a modest house, I was impressed by the generous sizes and proportions of the public rooms, as well as Mr. Ford's slavish adherence to symmetry when placing doors on either end of the long or short wall of the room. It gave more than a nod to the elegant living while maintaining a comfortable sensibility. I wanted it desperately, but it was not to be. My search to live in a Clem Ford house would continue. One of the elements of his floor plan that I was drawn to but didn't realize was iconic to his designs was the fact that he relished placing rooms universally acknowledged to be private and only to be placed at the rear of the house, right there on the front. I saw this in the first house that I learned was a Clem Ford, and I came to know it in many others. Clem used the arrangement in his own house at Andrews. For example, he loved to place the kitchens of his house on the very front. I know from experience as an architect that my clients would recoil from this idea, but what they don't realize is that in many ways it's equivalent to the old-fashioned front porch. One can wash dishes and become aware of so many comings and goings, and it adds so much to the house's sense of community. In many ways, Ford was ahead of his time in knowing that there would be a post-servant era when the kitchen would be the heartbeat of the house. As with Ford himself, his houses have a relaxed elegance and a human scale that all of us find comfortable and appealing.